Hi, in this video I'm going to be talking about the process of how I acquired this business called Ezcapper with no contract or purchase agreement, completed a deal in one day, or within one day, that has more than 10x. So let's proceed. So to give you a bit of background, I found the business initially on a site called flippa.com. And the situation with this particular seller was quite unique. The seller actually, I believe, did an auction on this website. Remember, this is 15 years old, so I'm just recalling a lot from memory. But I believe he had an offer and it fell through. And I was communicating with him and asked him a few questions. And then he came back to me and he wanted to discuss a sale. Now, the seller was a person that was in his early 20s, probably like 2021, and he was a student that just finished learning how to do ASP coding. Now, I don't know if you know much about coding, but ASP is a very old technology from Microsoft, and it's considered a legacy technology. And he learned how to code this site through it. So he coded Ezcapper back in 2010, which is when I acquired it. Now, after the other prospective buyer bailed out, the seller was he really wanted to sell the business quickly. So after he reached out to me, I decided to, okay, let's take a look at this and see if it fits into my strategy. So after looking at it, well, I looked at it and thought, okay, I don't really know the space. I didn't even know what a sports handicapper was at that time. This is a person that basically is a tout. He touts sports picks and sells his picks. And I actually didn't have any experience with Microsoft servers at that time. I knew about ASP, but I didn't know anything of intimate detail. And I actually didn't really know a lot about marketing a SaaS service. For those of you who don't know what SaaS is, it's software as a service. So when I looked at it, okay, I was a little bit apprehensive, but I decided that, okay, anything that's worth investing, worth making money at, is worth taking a look at and spending the time. So that's when I decided to proceed in doing my initial call. So after he reached out by messaging, I initiated a Skype call. Now, after we did the call, there's a couple of things I identified. So from a voice call, and a video call, you can see and pick up a lot of information. So I knew that the seller needed money fast because he mentioned his motivation was to buy a car. He wanted to travel with his girlfriend and needed money. The asking price at that time was, I think, 45, 50,000, approximately, in that range. He, from the tone, it sounded like he wanted to do a very fast transaction. He actually needed the money yesterday because I think after the other buyer bailed out, he wanted to move ahead. He likely would, just from talking with him, he didn't have a lot of business experience. So any NDA, non-compete that I would construct was really just a formality, but it wasn't anything that I knew he would adhere to. And the reality is right after I bought the business, he actually moved ahead and built a clone. So and tried to approach my customer. So I already anticipated that ahead of time. He had zero documentation on the business or any of the business processes. So that's something I had to recreate from scratch. He gave me some revenue figures, a guideline, which I'm going to show you in a minute. So right here you can see the notes I have. I'm using OneNote. It was on April 16, 2010. I called it First Talk. And he gave me a rough idea of his revenues. So his costs were about $500 a month, and his revenue, which I was more concerned about, was $1,000 for this product here, which is probably about a year, I think, because he'd only had 10 subscribers at $20. So it was about $200. It was roughly that much. I don't remember what these figures were, but I remember this wasn't very much. The main business, which you saw, it was generating about $3,500 on a recurring basis per month. And there was some other, this is the customer data. So he quoted me a revenue or a profit of about $36,000 after costs. So that was essentially what I had to deal with in terms of initial figures. So at this point, I decided to make my move, and I wanted to evaluate, okay, whether I'd be interested. And I would need to spend a bit of time just to. I figured at a high level that he was doing 36,000 in revenues, asking 45,000. I can probably get him down a little bit, and then I would make my money back in a year. Of course, that's at a high level. Most businesses that you buy online, a software business, is probably going to be more expensive. Could be 2 to 3 years. It really depends on the nature of the business, however. But that's sort of the gauge that I used. Now, at this point, I moved ahead by showing money available. This is a very important step because it shows that you are very serious and have the funds available. So I sent him screenshots, and I even offered to log in to my bank account to show that the money was available, because this is a very strong incentivizer for them to move quickly. The fact that I have money available and I can spend it right now. I also did not do a purchase agreement, a formal purchase agreement. It means in terms of a long document. I just did a very short email. So it was an email that was essentially 3 or 4, like maybe 5 lines. I stated in the last line there it was not to compete. I knew that a purchase agreement for something of this size, a transaction ranging from $35,000 to $45,000, is not really worth it to spend, obviously, any legal fees or even buying a contract template and spending the time to do it, because I knew that there's risk involved. It's likely he's going to violate some of these terms anyways. So, and it's not enforceable. I mean, any legal action I would take would be, it would not make any economic sense, because the cost of hiring a lawyer would be more expensive than, and enforcing it would be prohibitive. Instead, I already knew in advance that in order to get what I needed, I would need to stage payments. So I would be able to stage payments to get all the deliverables that I need. So I staged the whole transaction, and it was done over a course of 3 to 4 days. But essentially, he would deliver certain aspects of the business, such as a domain name, upon a certain payment, and then he would deliver transferring the server after first, and then I would give him the second payment. In this case, this is what you do, what I would call low trust sellers, right? And how do you know he's low trust? Well, you know he's low trust because of how I met him. I met him online, and he was a person with not much business experience. So in this type of scenario, I had already had that type of structure in mind. Now, when I buy a business like that, what am I actually looking for? So because I invest in income streams, I'm not looking to spend a lot of time dedicated to each income stream, because I'm trying to run dozens of them at the same time and outsource them to third parties to operate. So I can't have businesses that are overly complicated. So I look at how can this be streamlined to operate automatically? What is he doing that I can boil down to less than 5 hours of engagement in the initial 2 months? So I would spend 5 hours a week for the initial month or 2 months, and then after that it'd be less than an hour per week. And then after that, probably my next stage is like a couple hours a month. So I look to kind of scale down my time over the course of 6 months. I'm also looking at, okay, what's involved in this business that I can outsource. So for example, in this case, Microsoft Server maintenance and administration is something that I'm not an expert in. I can learn the basics, but I know that I can outsource that easily because there are a lot of people available who have that skill set. If it's something that's more esoteric, a skill that nobody knows how to do, then those costs can be very expensive. So for example, coding is more expensive for languages that are not popular just because there's less supply. I also asked myself this key question: how many % of the customers will leave upon a transfer of ownership? And so I looked at this business and I anticipated a 10% level at max. And so will a 10% loss of revenue cause me not to purchase this? And based on the valuation that I mentioned, no, it wouldn't. If the revenue went down 3,000, I'd still pay the asking price for the business. And the reason why I forecasted a 10% is because this is a hosted business. Hosted business means that the customers don't really want to move to another platform and transfer a domain name for really a small incentive in terms of cost benefit. So I figured this is probably a reasonable assumption to make. And then I looked at the competition. I do a typical SWOT analysis. For those of you who don't know, it's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And I realized also with competition, there's no real threat in terms of competition. He was the only, there was one other company doing this, but they weren't really good. So I thought, okay, this is a very niche business. The worst case scenario is I lose 10% of my customers. Okay, at this point, I'm going to stage the payments. I know he's urgent. He really wants to sell it. I decide to proceed. Now, in order to avoid making an overly complicated video, so after I created the email and staged the first payment, which was for the domain name, then I had the server transferred. The most important part is the standard operating procedures. And let me just show you the manuals that I created. So I started out here doing a design. So you can see on the right side here, there's the different manuals. And so I did a design manual, how you create a website. And so I spent hours with him to reproduce this. I did this because I anticipated after he received the payment, and I had made the assumption that he would never be seen again. So I created detailed manuals, and I also had the last payment where he would have to provide a certain amount of support over the course of a month. I would make the last payment. I think the last payment was very small. It was like $2,000, but it was enough of an incentive for him to actually proceed. So this shows you how to add new pages. So I created these manuals based on the assumption that the person who would be administering this had no technical knowledge. So this is an important point in order for me to proceed with the transaction. Now, needless to say, that the transaction itself was very successful. I've owned the business. Even though I haven't been updating and maintaining it, I bought it as an income stream. And so I already knew that the income stream would be maintained for a certain amount of time. I would get customers, lose customers, but over time the technology would essentially be obsolete. But even to this day, I still have 10 customers making, for the last 10 years, 15 years, almost probably close to 10x in terms of total proceeds, in terms of engagement. So, and it's required extremely low engagement. I probably spend less than 30 minutes a month on this business right now. So let me go over one of the key points here. In order to be successful at acquiring income streams, you have to make educated assumptions. Remember, if you're paying, the more you pay, the more due diligence you're going to do. But some due diligence is required to acquire profitable and long-term successful income streams. But too much can turn the seller off, and it can also be overkill. So I'll give you just a quick reference to another site I bought. I bought another income stream, which was a very small hosting business. And I did very basic due diligence, basically PayPal payments to ensure that they're coming in regularly. And also the nature of the business was hosting. So I knew that it was very difficult for customers to move away from the business. So I knew that the revenue wouldn't really be something that's threatened. The technology was, I mean, to be frank, it was total garbage. The proprietary software they made to host the websites was terrible. But I had a backup. I had WordPress, which I would just transition them to, which is open source. So that was very easy. The reality of that situation was that after I bought it, the owner, one of the employees of the owner, tried to take the customers, but they couldn't because of the fact that the domain names were being hosted by a service that I controlled. So they couldn't really easily move away. They could insist, or the customers could have insisted to move it away, but there's too much work for them to do that. So I knew that I didn't have to waste a lot of time in figuring those parts out. I just had to really focus upon the key due diligence which was the fact that payments were coming in and that I knew that I had control of the domains. So as a final point, in terms of tips, be ready to transact quickly and have money on hand. That's very important. Also know what the core of the business is all about in order to save time and due diligence, as I just talked about. You want to be able to structure deals based on the assumption that you're never going to see the seller again. So you want to stage payouts and work from high priority to low priority in terms of deliverables. So stage the payouts according to the deliverables. Don't dwell on formalities. So a lot of people will spend time on formalities such as doing due diligence of various parts, contracts, non-disclosures. I didn't do that. It was just a simple email. It took me like a minute and a half to write. And then understand what the worst case scenario is going to be, realistically, and know that there will be risk. You can't make money in terms of acquiring income streams without having some risk and the occasional loss. It's almost like trading. So if you have any questions or comments, I apologize. I'm not a professional video maker. And I typically do this for my own portfolio, but I wanted to educate people out there and stimulate, a possible a conversation or partnerships or anything. So check out my videos. I try to drop them twice a week. And if you have questions, let me know. Thank you very much.